I want to begin by congratulating Wab Kinew on his election last night in Manitoba. It is a good thing to have another progressive premier across the country that we're going to be able to work with on issues of affordability, issues of housing, issues of reconciliation, obviously, but a lot of good work that we're going to be able to do together. I look forward to speaking with him to congratulate him and start that work a little later today. Je veux commencer en félicitant Wab Kinew pour son élection avec le NPD du Manitoba hier soir. Ça va être une occasion pour nous de travailler avec un autre premier ministre progressiste à travers le pays. On va pouvoir travailler ensemble évidemment sur l'abordabilité, le coût de la vie, le logement, la réconciliation et bien des enjeux importants. We have made sure that there are top public servants who are looking very carefully into the issue, including digging into the archives. They're going to make recommendations to the relevant ministers.
The RCMP is investigating allegations of misconduct related to outsourcing contracts at CBSA, including the same companies. Wab Kinew, you've commented on this in the past. What's your reaction?
Obviously, the RCMP will be doing its work. This is something we need to take very seriously. Ottawa has always said that we would be there as a partner. It's an important step forward on reconciliation.
How many Nazis is Canada supposed to award before you open this?
Was I watching it?
Oh no, just thought. What are your thoughts on Kinew winning?
It was quite a day. It was a sad day. We lost a couple of Liberals, including Dougal in my riding. But at the same time, I'm glad we're able to elect the first First Nations Premier in Canada. That's a joyful day, and I'm really happy the NDP were able to fight off a campaign of hate and intolerance, and I think that sends a good message for politics.
Yeah, and with the landfill surge, should Ottawa take a bigger role? I know the feasibility study is still coming, but what do you think about the issue?
I think we need to converse with the new provincial government and certainly the families, and we need to do more, but we need to engage with a government, a new provincial government, and of course the families.
The government said there that they want to search the landfill, so will this federal government step up and provide the funds to make sure that happens?
I think there's going to be some very interesting conversations that are likely to happen today.
What about the Liberal Party?
Thank you. Thank you.
What only have one seat now in Manitoba? There's only one Liberal seat in Manitoba.
They have to look within themselves and see where we go from here. I mean, federally, it's a strong Liberal territory. Provincially, not so much. We have to ask ourselves why. Thank you. C'est une journée avec beaucoup d'émotions. Je suis triste qu'on a perdu John Girard et Dougal Lamont, des très bons politiciens dans leur circonscription, et Dougal était un bon leader. Je suis content qu'on a le Première Nation Premier ministre au Manitoba. Ça me fait fier. Ça me fait plus fier que les néos ont battu une campagne qui était vraiment odieuse avec beaucoup de haine. Ça fait que ça me donne des perspectives qui sont positives. Merci.
I know that Minister Anthony Housefather will have a statement about that later today, but this is really exciting, I think, to have the very first Indigenous Premier of this country, to see Indigenous people take their rightful place as leading organizations, governments, and now provinces. I'm very excited for him and very excited to work with Premier Kinew.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Any reaction to the Manitoba election last night?
Yeah, well, I think it's clear that the people of Manitoba wanted change, and I'm extremely optimistic and hopeful for the relationship that we'll be able to forge with the new government in Manitoba moving forward.
What do you think is past comments? Do you think it's a problem? Past comments, this criminal record, and all that?
I'm not sure which past comments. In terms, I think Mr.
On women, on gays.
Oh, I think Mr. Kinew has addressed these things in plenty over the years, and I think that he has shown through his leadership that he is somebody that can grow and evolve as a person and as an individual, and clearly the people of Manitoba have reflected that sentiment in terms of the way they cast their ballots.
Robert Falcon-Ouellet said in an interview yesterday evening,
Sorry, I missed that.
Robert Falcon-Ouellet said in an interview yesterday evening that it was hard to be associated to the federal Liberals when he campaigned in Manitoba. So is that something that is detrimental, you think, for the party?
I came off of a by-election 2 months ago in Winnipeg South Centre with 56% of the vote. So my experience has been very different than Mr. Falco's.
What does it mean for the federal Liberals?
I think any time we have a change in government, we have a responsibility at a provincial or territorial level to forge new relationships. There are 5 members of the Legislative Assembly in Manitoba that I share territory with in Winnipeg South Centre. I've got a very good working relationship with all of them, and I think that this is a meaningful opportunity for the Prime Minister vis-a-vis the relationship with Mr. Kinew.
But is it the good news for you? Compared to the Progressive Conservatives?
Well, I mean, the government is a day old. So let's start by building relationships and starting to forge these new relationships. But as I said at the outset, I'm hopeful and optimistic that there is going to be a strong relationship between the federal government and the province of Manitoba.
Can you intend to search the landfill? Is there a room for the Liberals to take part in helping fund that?
Sorry, I missed the first part.
Is there room for the government to help fund the landfill search, since Kinew is committed to that?
Yeah, I mean, Minister Ananda Sangare and Minister Miller before him have been committed to working alongside the provincial government in Manitoba and the municipal government. I think that there is a broader opportunity with the electoral result we saw in Manitoba yesterday to further engage on this conversation in a way that the previous Premier was not willing to. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to have some meaningful action moving forward, but I'll leave it for the Minister to comment on that.
The question is, should there be a search in your view?
We should be trying to do something here. And what the previous Premier was unwilling to do was to commit to any form of movement on this file. I know that the Minister and the government is keen to work with the new Premier of Manitoba, who himself has said that he too is keen to make sure that there are meaningful ways.
I mean, is it the search itself, which could cost between 84 and 184 million?
Yeah,
is that what you're thinking about?
Well, right now I think it's a conversation between the Prime Minister, the Minister, new ministers in the provincial government, and the Premier himself to determine, alongside the families, that's the most important piece, that alongside the families at the table and the municipal government, to work out what the details may be. Thanks, everyone. Dan.
How are you defining these cuts that are going to be happening in defence, and how can we go to our allies who are telling us we need to have 2% when we're actually cutting from our budget and getting further away from that 2% target?
To be very clear, we've made very significant investments since 2017 in the defence budget, and there are other. We've made also very significant commitments to NORAD modernization and to the acquisition of the ships and the planes that the Canadian Armed Forces needs. But within a $30 billion plus budget, it's also important to exercise control over spending and make sure that we're getting true value for every dollar that's spent. That's my responsibility.
But this is getting us further away from the 2% target that we need to be at. Anytime you remove money, it means you're further away from the target.
Well, first of all, the budget is increasing and has been increasing since 2017. And by 2026, it'll be up 70% over what it was prior to 2017. And we are contemplating making additional significant investments in D&D. But in order to make those investments with confidence and be able to tell Canadians that we're getting real value for those investments in the Department of National Defence, all those investments are intended to create military capability and to support the members of the military who do the important work for us. My responsibility is to make sure that all of those dollars are being spent smart and creating real value.
But isn't it cost more money?
So show that. Now answer your question.
Cost more money to figure out where to cut? Isn't it easier just to? It costs money to audit and to do the research.
Quite honestly, I think there's nothing wrong, and in fact, it's my responsibility to ask questions of the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces about how they're spending money. They need to, frankly, do better in their recruitment and retention of military personnel. We're down a substantial number of people, and we need those people to do the important work that needs to be done. We're also making significant investments. I want to make sure that the administrative processes, their HR and recruitment processes, issues around the use of consultants, executive travel, and other professional services that in every Canadian dollar we spend, we're creating real value for Canadians.
Do you worry that by making those kind of budgetary decisions, you undermine support for Ukraine? If we don't have enough for our own soldiers, will at some point the public ask, why are we still spending money overseas?
Well, I think our support for Ukraine has been unwavering. We've made very, very significant investments in Ukraine, both financial investments to help the country, but also military investments to help them in their battle and their fight against the Russian aggression and the illegal invasion of their country. We'll continue to provide that support, and the Canadian Armed Forces have been a significant part of that as well. It's not just simply giving money or even materiel to Ukraine, but some of the training work the Canadian Armed Forces have done, for example, has resulted in the training of almost 39,000 Ukrainian soldiers. That training has helped in their ability to be effective in the battlefield, but also to survive in that battlefield. And we're going to continue to make those investments through the Canadian Armed Forces. I think Canadians do understand why Canada's support for that struggle is so important, because it really is fighting for a global rules order. And those investments are important and will continue. And at the same time, we also I recognize my responsibility to build up military capacity and capability within the Canadian Armed Forces. We asked them to do some extraordinary jobs in securing our own borders, but also in global security. We're going to continue to make those investments, but we're going to make those investments in a way which is mindful of getting real value for every dollar spent.
What does value mean when it comes to the military? What is value?
Value means every dollar invested in increasing military capability and readiness is a dollar well spent. Every dollar that we spend in supporting the men and women who perform that role, in making sure they have the support and resources they need to do the important job we ask of them, is a dollar well spent. And my job is to make sure that we make investments that increase military readiness and support those men and women who serve in the armed forces.
Then what are you cutting? What are you cutting? Where do you see things?
Frankly, we're not making cutting. What we're doing is we're looking very hard at all the ways in which we spend money. The administrative processes that we engage in, they have to be efficient. They have to get the job done. And we have seen that although there's been a very substantial increase in military spending, we have not seen the results in, for example, increased recruitment or retention of personnel. We've got to make sure that we're doing that job effectively and efficiently and getting the job done. I'm also looking at the use of consultants, executive travel. There's a number of expenditures that frankly, I need to understand how they contribute to military readiness and capability.
If the military has no bullets, I mean, Wayne Eyre said last week that if the military was called upon today, the Canadian military, to defend itself in this country, they'd run out of bullets in like 4 days.
And the Chief of Defence has highlighted another significant area of concern, which is our procurement processes to get the military the material that they need to do their job. And the CDS has been very clear that there are challenges within those processes. And making sure they work, making sure that we invest in the things that make that more efficient is my job, and that's what I'm doing.
Is this strengthen the case for some sort of national emergency response service? And so often we see the military called on to help out with things like floods, fires, and we're just going to keep seeing that.
Listen, the work that the military has done in responding to emergencies in this country, floods, fires, wildfires, even during the pandemic when they went into long-term care facilities, the Canadian military has always answered the call when Canadians needed them. I've been one of the ministers responsible for responding to the province's request for assistance and calling upon the military. It's also why we have to invest in their capability and the men and women who provide those services.
Does that take away from their core duty, though?
What's that?
Does that distract from their core duty?
No, to be really clear, the military has a number of core duties, including domestic response and supporting Canadians here at home. They also have a responsibility to fulfill our missions in maintaining global security and in the sovereignty of our own country. But being there to support Canadians is an important job of the Canadian military. They've always been there for us. And my job is to make sure that they have the material, the resources, the people and the supports that they need in order to continue to do that for Canada.
So there'll be no job losses as a result of this reduction of spending?
Actually, my intention is to significantly increase the recruitment and retention of military personnel. We're short people. We have important work to do, and we need more people to do it.
By cutting consulting contracts, I'm assuming?
No. By making sure that all of our processes in administration and recruitment and the retention of people, the supports that we provide to the military, the equipment that we provide them, has the positive effect of increasing their capability and readiness and supporting the men and women who do that important job. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Minister.
Vous avez parlé que peut-être les étudiants étrangers mettaient une pression sur les logements. Il faudrait peut-être penser à réduire le nombre. Vous êtes rendu où dans cette réflexion?
C'est OK si j'ai posé une réponse en anglais.
You got my question?
I think so. Look, so my own view is that having a large number of international students in Canada is very good for the Canadian economy. It's also good not just in the short term because people contribute to the GDP. This is a pipeline of future Canadians that are educated in Canada that bring their talents to Canada. We need to make sure that we're able to successfully absorb and support the people who come here. What we've seen in recent years is a significant increase in the number of students who are coming, and there's not a decision by the federal government to set set a target on our temporary programs. The way that you probably know this, but for the sake of the audience, the way our temporary programs work is they're driven by demand. We've seen provinces and institutions significantly continue to welcome large numbers of people. We examine the eligibility of a person to be admitted to Canada, but the decision on which institutions have access to the international student program is purely within the purview of provincial governments. So we want to work with them to make sure that they're putting in place the measures to crack down on the bad actors and make sure that we're working with institutions who are doing the best in Canada to welcome students, to give some kind of advantage when it comes to processing permits, for example, to make sure that we're accommodating those who come.
Have you made progress with any other cities on the point? I know there's a handful of progress with Yellow Week. Have you been making any other progress with cities?
Yes, in fact, there are in excess of 500 applications that have come in through the Housing Accelerator Fund. You'll probably have seen the City of London's application that was approved. You'll have seen the exchanges we've had with Calgary, more recently with Halifax. We're still working with some of the cities in Metro Vancouver to ensure that they can build the number of homes that are indicated in the application. Just recently, this may be something you became aware of, we are approving an application from Vaughan. They are doing great work to increase density near transit, to create incentives that's going to lead to more apartments constructed, and also to increase their zoning as of right to 4 units anywhere in the city. One of the things that I find really exciting is I'm starting to see cities take it upon themselves to increase their ambition because they see what's happening with the Housing Accelerator Fund and they want to unlock access. It's wonderful if we receive an application and encourage people to do more. It's even better if cities choose to do more on their own in a way that will work for them. And this change in approach from cities like Vaughan is, it fills me with a sense of optimism. It's demonstrating that although we have a long way to go, it's starting to work. And it's going to lead to tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of more homes over the next number of years. It's the Housing Accelerator Fund is proving that it's a successful approach in terms of changing the way that cities build homes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 500 applications seems like a lot. Is there going to be some type of backlog? I mean, we're still waiting on hearing, you had that big announcement in London. What are the rest?
It'll depend on which stream. So we started with a smaller number of growth leaders in Canada who have demonstrated the capacity to have the most significant population growth and who are willing to increase their ambition on housing. We're dealing with sort of a small number of communities there. Then we're going to move to the other large and medium-sized cities who've submitted applications as we start to deal with the smaller communities. So one of the reasons that there will be a longer period of time for the smaller communities, for example, is because the deadline had been extended, so more of them could submit applications. You'll see over the course of the fall there will be more approvals that we will be making. You'll see as we get into the new year there will be an enormous number of cities and communities of different sizes that will be approved. But this is the Housing Accelerator Fund. I think I owe it to Canadians to move as quickly as I can. We good? Okay.
Where it says calling on the government to release any records it has about Nazi war criminals. Is that something that you would support?
I mean, I think we have to recognize we have a horrible past with Nazi war criminals. We opened our country to people after the war in a way that made it easier to come if you were a Nazi than if you were a Jew. And then we did a terrible job prosecuting Nazi war criminals as well. If you compare us to the United States, where they've convicted more than half of the people they prosecuted, and we've convicted almost nobody. So this is something that we definitely have to look at, but we also have to look at the question of what those redactions are in the in the Justice Deschenes Report. And so I know that could bring pain to a lot of people in Eastern European communities. So I think we have to work together. We have to work collaboratively with the Jewish organizations and Ukrainian Canadian Congress and come to a decision on how we deal with this.
And what does that look like when we see there's been multiple honors given to people who served in the SS Galicia? I mean, doesn't it show that there's maybe this disconnect about what people know about Canadian history?
I think that's absolutely true, but I think, again, going back in the past, a lot of people aren't looking at what their CVs said 70 years ago. I mean, but I think we as a country need to face the fact that we have to teach more about genocides, especially the Holocaust, and Canadian children throughout this country need to be learning about it.
Have you spoken with B'nai B'rith about their request?
Of course. I've spoken with B'nai B'rith, I've spoken with Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, I've spoken with CIJA, and I'm working with MPs from other communities to talk to, for example, Ukrainian Canadian Congress. We have to make sure that what we do is something that draws consensus. We have a war right now with Ukraine against Russia, and we have to make sure that
right now it's a no for you about restarting.
It's not a question of no. We have have to do something. We have to look at the materials, and I'm sure there's much of it that can be unredacted.
Have you spoken to cabinet about it?
I've been speaking to colleagues about it. It's just something that we need to make sure that we find a consensus with all of these communities. But again, there's a lot of material in the Deschenes Report that I'm sure that could be unredacted. But you can't just willy-nilly say everything because I don't know what's exactly there. And there are privacy interests. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bonjour, M. Guilbeault. Ça vous fait d'entendre M. Legault ramener le projet du troisième lien autoroutier?
Notre position n'a pas changé là, sur cette question-là. Le gouvernement fédéral ne finance pas la construction de nouvelles infrastructures routières. On finance bien entendu l'entretien du réseau routier et le transport collectif. On a très hâte de voir notamment le projet de tramway à Québec avancer. C'est un projet que nous soutenons depuis de très nombreuses années, comme les autres projets de transport collectif partout ailleurs au pays.
Que M. Legault revienne avec ça?
Non, pas du tout.
Vous déçu? Est-ce que c'est votre réaction?
Non, je pense pas. Je pense qu'on voit que dans le cas de bien des projets, que ce soit des projets de logement ou des projets d'infrastructure comme le tramway, dû évidemment à l'inflation, l'augmentation des taux d'intérêt, il y a une augmentation des coûts. On va certainement nous sommes là pour ce projet-là depuis les tout débuts et on va continuer d'être là.
C'était quoi votre réaction quand vous entendez M. Legault hier?
Je n'ai pas vraiment notre position n'a pas changé sur cette question-là.
Vous n'avez pas réagi.
Manitoba was one of the provinces that was very against some of the federal environmental measures. Are you more optimistic now that it's a different government?
Very optimistic from the position that the provincial NDP has taken on many issues that are dear to us, such as climate change, such as reconciliation. I see great potential for us to be able to collaborate. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Ça vous fait d'entendre M. Legault ramener le troisième lien autoroutier?
Pardon, mais écoutez, ça soulève plusieurs questions. Je me demande, entre le lundi 2 octobre et le mardi 3 octobre, est-ce que les raisons évoquées par le gouvernement pour renier cet engagement-là ont soudainement fondu comme neige au soleil? Est-ce qu'elles ont disparu? Est-ce que soudainement beaucoup plus de trafic entre la rive sud et la rive nord? Est-ce que les coûts du projet ont drastiquement diminué? Moi, ça me laisse perplexe, comme je pense bien des gens dans la région de Québec. Puis des fois, quand je regarde toute cette saga-là, ça me fait un peu penser au dîner de con. Et tristement, c'est la population de Québec qui semble y être conviée.
Un rattrapage politique, donc?
Je vais laisser le soin à M. Legault d'expliquer le fond de sa pensée sur cet enjeu-là. Je suis sûr qu'il y aura beaucoup de questions qui
Est-ce que ça vous a fait rire? C'était quoi votre réaction quand vous l'avez vu?
Moi, j'ai jamais cru à ce projet-là. Je pense que c'était judicieux de l'abandonner. Je pense que dans l'intérêt de, disons, la culture politique et la sanctité de la politique, ça aurait été une bonne chose que ça soit peut-être dit plus clairement avant la dernière campagne électorale au Québec. Mais maintenant, s'ils veulent raviver, il y a beaucoup de questions qui restent sans réponse.
M. Legault semble penser que c'est à cause de ça, de l'abandon de cette promesse qu'ils ont perdu. Est-ce que c'est la lecture que vous faites?
Ça en fait partie, bien que dans Jean Talon, c'est pas un projet très porteur, c'est plus l'idée d'avoir, je pense que le sentiment de plusieurs dans la population au Québec, c'est qu'on n'aura pas tout dit avant la dernière campagne générale. Donc je pense que c'est plus ça que l'abandon comme tel du projet, parce que quand je me promène dans les rues de Sainte-Foy-Sillery, la plupart des gens voient peu d'intérêt à ce projet-là.
Donc de le ressusciter, ça ne change pas sur le problème de fond, c'est ce que vous dites?
Moi, je ne crois pas, mais écoutez, j'ai visiblement pas la même lecture.
Mettons que vous étiez chef du Parti libéral du Québec. Qu'est-ce que vous proposeriez?
Dans les hypothétiques, on peut aller très très loin. Mais disons que personnellement, je ne vois pas l'intérêt de ce projet-là, construire l'un des plus gros tunnels au monde pour la population qui est desservie avec les coûts qu'on ne connaît pas exactement, mais la facture risque d'être salée. Je pense qu'il y aura des projets plus porteurs pour le Québec. Voilà. Merci.
Monsieur Rodriguez, est-ce que vous pensez des nouveaux revirements de la CAQ sur le troisième lien à Québec?
Nous, on n'a pas reçu de projet, donc il n'y a rien de concret non plus. Si jamais il y en a un, mais on verra, on analysera si ça transport en commun.
Mais vous seriez d'accord de vous rasseoir avec M. Legault sur ce projet-là?
On est toujours prêt à discuter sur tout.
It's truly a problem in Canada when you have the leader of the Conservative Party repeating the same false things that Elon Musk is saying on his Twitter account. What we've always said and what the legislation does is actually make sure that we support our creative industries and make sure that they have a voice online.
Madame la Saint-Onge, les voyages de M. Bissonnette, est-ce que vous trouvez que ça coûte un peu cher pour...
Ben, écoutez, je vous invite à poser des questions à Radio-Canada. Radio-Canada, c'est une société d'État qui est indépendante et gère leur propre budget.
Ce matin, il y a encore une histoire. Google dit qu'il n'est pas satisfait finalement de la réglementation. Est-ce qu'il y a encore possibilité de s'entendre avec eux du côté du gouvernement? Vous avez eu plusieurs rencontres avec eux. Visiblement, ça n'a pas donné les résultats qu'eux voulaient.
Ouais, ben, depuis le début, Google a adopté une attitude vraiment différente de celle de Facebook. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ont participé au processus législatif. Ils nous ont envoyé leurs commentaires au sujet de la réglementation. Je comprends qu'ils ont encore des questionnements. De mon côté, je l'ai toujours dit, ma porte est ouverte. Puis mon but, c'est de trouver le juste équilibre, s'assurer que les gens du web participent à soutenir nos salles de nouvelles. Et comme vous le savez, depuis 2008, il y a plus de 500 salles de nouvelles qui ont fermé leurs portes. Il y a des milliers de journalistes qui ont disparu. On parlait de désinformation tantôt. C'est sûr que si on veut combattre la désinformation, on a besoin de soutenir le journalisme au Canada. C'est essentiel dans notre démocratie, puis c'est ça l'objectif en
C'est quoi la prochaine étape dans ce dossier-là?
You're open to changes to speaking regulations to kind of bring on board Google, or do you need a legislative fix?
Yeah, of course, because we were in a consultation process that lasted 30 days. I know that Google submitted their comments, but also other news outlets. So now we're collecting all the comments that we've received, and we're going to propose the final regulation shortly.
Merci, merci. Des changements que vous allez apporter peuvent répondre aux préoccupations de Google, parce que
j'ai encore confiance qu'on va s'entendre avec Google. Les canaux de communication sont ouverts. Notre objectif, comme je l'ai dit, c'est de s'assurer qu'il y a un équilibre dans les relations commerciales entre les grandes plateformes et nos médias canadiens. Puis on va atteindre cet équilibre.
Les voyages à 9 000 $, c'est pas un peu...
Là, c'est encore en processus de démarrage. Comment est-ce que vous expliquez ça?
Bien, simplement, c'est important d'avoir une institution pour appuyer le fait français hors du Québec. C'est quelque chose qui m'interpelle personnellement. Évidemment, les députés acadiens aussi, les députés franco-ontariens. Randy Boissonneau, je dirais le succès d'une institution, aussi ambitieuse soit-elle, ne se mesure pas en moi. C'est clair qu'il y a 6 personnes qui travaillent maintenant, mais leur objectif, ça va être de nous aider à réformer un système où on n'a jamais vraiment bien exercé notre juridiction, c'est-à-dire en faisant la promotion des francophones, du fait français en dehors du Québec. Ça va être une institution, oui, ambitieuse, mais là, c'est clair qu'il reste encore beaucoup de travail à faire, que ce soit les niveaux ambitieux qu'on essaie de...
Est-ce que c'est acceptable, ce retard-là? Parce que on dit que l'immigration francophone, c'est urgent, puis là, ça prend, comme ça devait démarrer il y a plus d'1 an et demi, là.
Oui, mais c'est urgent, mais il reste encore que le fédéral se doit de faire un travail qui n'a jamais très bien fait, c'est-à-dire s'assurer que les niveaux, les pourcentages que l'on vise, aussi peu ambitieuses soient-elles, soient plus ambitieuses et qu'on puisse les réaliser. Ça veut dire de mettre en marche des institutions comme ce centre et d'autres pour s'assurer qu'on puisse avoir une pérennité, quitte à pouvoir augmenter ce pourcentage. Alors, moi, je ne serais jamais satisfait
Encore ce matin, on est passé de 30 à 40 employés à 6 employés.
Oui.
L'annonce initiale, comment ça se fait qu'il y a beaucoup moins d'employés que prévu?
Bien, comme je l'ai dit, le succès d'une institution ne se mesure pas simplement en moi. C'est une institution qui va rayonner pendant des années. On va s'assurer qu'ils vont avoir le financement qui leur est dû. Mais c'est clair qu'il reste du travail à faire, non seulement pour cette institution, mais pour le gouvernement du Canada à réaliser les paliers qu'on vise.
Ce matin, il y a encore une histoire dans la presse d'un autre immigrant qui perd son statut parce que les papiers n'ont pas été acceptés dans les bons moments. Ça fait 2 cas en une semaine qui sont portés à votre attention. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ça?
Je dirais qu'il y en a des tonnes. Moi, étant député du centre-ville de Montréal, j'étais, avant que je sois nommé ministre de l'Immigration, le député le plus achalandé au niveau des cas d'immigration. Sachez que les gens qui viennent nous voir, c'est pas l'instance de premier recours. Ce sont des gens évidemment désespérés. Parfois, moi, mon défi, c'est d'essayer de moderniser ça. On a procédé, c'est-à-dire le ministre qui m'a précédé a procédé à une certaine modernisation dans le sens où on pouvait avoir accès durant une semaine, pendant 1 heure, pendant une période arrêtée, pour pouvoir parler à des personnes en ligne. Sans ça, la ligne téléphonique était achalandée. c'était bloqué, les gens n'arrivaient pas à
Vous parlez de la ligne des députés,
oui,
là?
ligne des députés.
Elle était trop achalandée.
Elle était trop achalandée, puis il a dû...
Puis là, on l'abandonne. Il me semble que c'est pas la
C'est pas une
bonne
question de
voie à
l'avoir
suivre.
abandonné, mais c'était de rationaliser le processus pour avoir un processus qui était plus rationnel, où les gens pouvaient envoyer leur cas directement au ministère, quitte à avoir une heure arrêtée durant la semaine où tous les cas pouvaient avoir traité. Là, visiblement, dans certaines situations, ça ne marche pas. Puis moi, je suis toujours ouvert à réouvrir la ligne téléphonique. Mais il y a un système maintenant qui marche mieux pour certains députés que d'autres. Puis là, ma réflexion à l'interne, c'est d'essayer de rectifier le tir pour m'assurer que les gens puissent avoir le service qu'ils ont besoin.
So you and Mr. LeMay attended a funding announcement for a Montreal company called Butler AI. We got a contract to find misconduct and sexual harassment in the public service. Now the RCMP is investigating that. They're alleging widespread wrongdoing.
Sorry, when was this?
It was a couple of years ago, Butler AI. Doesn't recall.
I'd have to give you a proper answer.
Est-ce que l'élection de Wab Kinew comme premier ministre Manitoba va faire débloquer le dossier des contrats?
C'est une question qu'il va falloir poser, je l'espère bien. C'est une question qui va falloir poser des relations courantes autochtones. Et c'est clair que l'élection de Wab Kinew, je le félicite. Il a fait un travail pour rallier les Manitobains. Puis on va voir ce qui se passe.
Excusez-moi, sur les étudiants étrangers, les visas des étudiants étrangers, cet été, votre collègue avait dit qu'il faudrait penser à les plafonner. Vous êtes rendu dans votre réflexion là-dessus? On les plafonne, on les limite, vous êtes rendu?
Dans la mesure où il y a beaucoup de provinces qui disent que c'est leur entière juridiction, c'est définitivement une conversation qui va devoir passer par les provinces. Ça ne veut pas dire que le fédéral s'en lave les mains, bien le contraire. L'idée d'un plafond, la question que je me pose, c'est est-ce que je suis en train de résoudre le problème tel qu'il a été identifié? C'est-à-dire, mon rôle, la juridiction du gouvernement fédéral, c'est de s'assurer de l'intégrité du système en passant par la fraude qui existe, donc on ne peut pas le nier, mais qui sévit dans d'autres provinces plus que d'autres. Il y a certaines provinces qui ont fait une bonne job d'essayer d'enrayer la fraude. Le Québec en est un, la Colombie-Britannique en est un autre, mais il y en a d'autres qui traînent la patte. Mais c'est clair, ça va prendre une coordination, puis fermer la vanne du jour au lendemain, ça peut causer un gros problème qu'on essaie de résoudre.
Quelles sont les provinces qui ont dit non? Donc c'est le Québec, mais...
Il y en a d'autres. Ça ne me tente pas d'en nommer juste ici en point de presse, mais c'est clair que j'ai besoin d'avoir une discussion avec mes collègues des provinces pour s'assurer, de un, qu'on puisse s'assurer que les étudiants internationaux qui viennent ici, qui font rayonner le Canada quand ils rentrent chez eux ou qui restent ici pour bâtir le Canada, puissent le faire, et que les gens qui font donner à faux espoirs à l'international par des mauvais acteurs soient punis. Alors, il y a des
ça donne l'impression que vous n'êtes pas dans cette direction là, de abaisser.
Mais d'un coup, en sortant immédiatement, c'est clair qu'il va falloir... Mon premier réflexe ne serait pas d'imposer un plafond. Mon premier réflexe, c'est de regarder là où se trouve la fraude, regarder le système, regarder l'intégrité du système, puis prendre des mesures dans ma juridiction pour m'assurer que je fasse mon job comme tout le monde. Je ne suis pas la police du financement historique de l'éducation postsecondaire. C'est pas ma job, puis les provinces vous diraient que c'est pas la job du fédéral. Historiquement, certaines provinces ont sous-financé l'éducation postsecondaire. C'est clair, les universités vont vous le dire. Là, ils ont rectifié le tir en attirant des étudiants qui vont payer 4 fois le prix qu'un étudiant comme mon fils paierait à McGill. Donc,
l'enjeu logement dans tout ça.
Ça a créé des effets pervers, ça a créé un écosystème, ça a créé de la fraude. Pour des gens qui, selon moi, comme des étudiants internationaux, ne devraient pas être visés. Et évidemment, des enjeux de logement que, je dirais, les grandes institutions, qu'on parle de UBC, qu'on parle de l'Université de Laval, sont en train de rectifier, mais c'est pas le cas partout, surtout avec les institutions qui prennent profit de ces étudiants-là. Donc, c'est une institution de société, c'est pas quelque chose qui est arrivé du du jour au lendemain, c'est pas quelque chose qui va se rectifier du jour au lendemain.
Sur le centre d'immigration francophone à Dieppe, comment vous expliquez que ça devait ouvrir en début 2022 au départ, quand ça a été annoncé avant l'élection fédérale, puis là on est en 2023 à l'automne, puis c'est toujours en phase de démarrage?
Mais si je comprends bien quand même qu'il va y avoir des plans, des nouvelles qui vont être annoncées cet automne.
Oui, mais c'est toujours, ça devait être opérationnel début 2022
mais
au départ.
encore une fois, ils sont en train de préparer le terrain pour s'assurer qu'il va y avoir un dévoilement du plan qui va être établi. J'ai bien hâte de recevoir des nouvelles. Je pense que pour toute la question d'immigration francophone, c'est un soin qui va être très important pour nous aider à vraiment atteindre nos cibles. Et puis bien hâte d'avoir le travail qui va être fait.
Mais si c'est urgent, ouais, comment c'est la première? Si c'est urgent l'immigration francophone, pourquoi est-ce que vous agissez pas plus vite?
Mais encore une fois, je pense que premièrement, c'était une bonne nouvelle en 2021 que nous avons pu démarrer des sous pour avoir un centre à Moncton, ou à Dieppe, je devrais dire. Et puis le travail qui va être fait, je pense qu'il va vraiment être très utile. Ils sont en train de tisser des liens avec les agences qui font du travail avec nos nouveaux arrivants à Moncton, Dieppe, Riverview. Et puis au niveau de tout le Canada atlantique. Et je pense que pour toute la question de pouvoir adresser la perte du poids démographique, le centre va jouer un rôle clé.
Mais qu'est-ce qu'il va faire exactement ce centre-là? Parce que quand on parle aux gens sur le terrain, il y a beaucoup de gens qui disent c'est même pas clair exactement ce que ce centre-là va faire. Êtes-vous capable, vous, de nous expliquer comme, ce que ce centre-là, dans des termes clairs et précis, qu'est-ce qui va changer?
Encore une fois, je pense qu'on va partager les plans cet automne qu'ils ont dit qu'on va avoir des lignes directrices puis aussi des plans de travail comme tel. C'est sûr qu'au cours la dernière année, ils ont embauché du personnel. Et puis, moi,
seulement 6 personnes. Vous avez dit 30 à 40 au départ.
On a dit au début que ça allait commencer à 6 et puis progressivement qu'il allait avoir une augmentation de personnel. Donc là, je dois m'en aller au caucus. On se parle plus tard. Merci beaucoup.
I confirmed that the federal government will be putting forth $740,000 towards additional work that needs to be done with respect to research, looking at how to handle issues of the biohazards, for example, as well as developing plans for construction and so on. So this was advised to the families yesterday, and this morning we are confirming again that money will be going forth to support the families.
What about the search? What about the search? Are you not funding the search?
Well, if you look at the feasibility study, we supported the feasibility study, and as a result of that, additional issues had to be addressed, and this is the next step in that process, and this is something that the Long Plain First Nations have been asking for. This is exactly the plan that they had sought, and we were able to confirm today that that supports are available and going forward to the communities.
What are the specific issues that the money will resolve?
There are a number of issues, and our news release will outline that, but particularly it will look at issues of biohazards and bio-waste that was identified in the feasibility study. It will be looking at additional work on conveyor belt, additional work on potentially construction, what is required for a search to be done. It'll be looking at personnel costs and personnel requirements, and it will also look to work with other levels of government as well to see what obstacles may exist, including issues around labor, including issues around permits for search such as this to be undertaken.
Is this the first step, or are you willing to make further steps down the line to ensure that a search does happen?
This is, in fact, the second step. If you look at what we did, we did support the initial feasibility study. $500,000 were given. This is an additional $740,000. And as we go forward, we look forward to working with the new government-elect and the Premier-elect to see what we could do together. This is something that requires the cooperation and definitely the support of all levels of government, including the provincial government. So we look forward to working with them.
Does the new government change the calculus of it? I mean, does it make a search more likely?
Well, the Prime Minister will be speaking to the Premier-elect today, and I look forward to working with his government as well as others as well to ensure that all parties who need to be at the table are able to support the families as they go forward.
People who kill Indigenous women are less likely to be charged with first-degree murder than people who kill non-Indigenous women. And when they are sentenced, sentences do tend to be shorter for the killings of Indigenous women.
What does this say to you in finding the work with justice to try to correct this imbalance in justice?
There's certainly issues of systemic racism, I think, that are profound within our criminal justice system. I know Minister Varani is well versed in the different challenges involving the criminal justice system. In my previous role, we were able to work to address issues of systemic overrepresentation of Indigenous and Black Canadians with the passage of C5. So there's definitely a lot of work to do, and I don't think the report today should be shocking. It is sadly part of the colonial legacy that we are trying to untangle.
Are there any contingencies attached to this new funding? When would you like to see this work done by?
Well, this is the time frame we're looking at is about 90 days, and we this money will be rolling out forthwith, and we're confident that the community impacted will be able to work with our officials to ensure speedy work is undertaken.
So then what happens after the 90 days?
Well, I think there's a window where I think we need to look at what the next steps are, and this is where we need all parties at the table, including the provinces.
So how committed are you to actually funding a search, though, the $184 million that it may take?
Well, I think I've been clear from the beginning. We're in it for the long haul, and we will continue to support the families. This is the next natural step in this process, and it's important that we get that information required in order for us to assess where we go from here, and this is where I'm looking forward to the province of Manitoba being at the table.
We'll take a last question. Do you personally think the federal government should put up money for the search? Do you personally think the federal government should have put up money for the search?
I think all governments need to be part of this process. From a federal perspective, I've been very clear that we're in it for the long haul, and we will work with the families, the community impacted, as well as the province of Manitoba to get to the right answer on this.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Just wanted to ask you about these calls to release the unclassified version of the Deschenes Report. The Prime Minister said today that bureaucrats are looking into it. Does that involve your department? Can you tell us what?
Yeah, I mean, we'll play a role in doing our part. I think in the context where impunity isn't an option, we need to look at whether we can declassify these documents, in what context, and in the context of people that are still alive, what presumptive due process they're entitled to. So I think people want answers. There's some work to do to get to the truth, and that's something that has to be done in a careful, thought-out fashion. But with, I don't think there's no excuse for delay other than the fact that we do have to have a process where the declassification of these documents is done in a thoughtful way.
I mean, the Commission's report is 35, almost 40 years old. It's dealing with issues in the 60s and 70s and 50s. Like, what could possibly be in it that it still needs to be declassified so many decades later?
Yeah, good point. Again, I'm not going to speculate on what is in and what is not in the parts that I have not read. I would encourage people that are interested to actually read the report, because it is telling, particularly through the lens of what we saw in the last week in Canada's dark history with welcoming Nazis to Canada in a context of a post-war world. But it is work that'll require sensitivity. It'll require a little bit of time and some work by people that put some thought into what elements get declassified, if not in their entirety.
On citizenship tests, what is exactly under consideration right now to remove the online option? What are the different factors you're weighing?
Are you talking about this so-called
citizenship ceremonies?
Look, I've said it publicly. I'll say it as long as anyone can hear it. Doing your citizenship ceremony in public in front of with your family and with people that are becoming new Canadians is a moment to remember in people's lives. It is the absolute preferred option. But again, in the context where I've been asked to take this department into the 21st century, we need options that are flexible, especially in rural regions, and we've certainly heard it from rural colleagues and from people that don't want to move 100 or 200 kilometers to do an in-person citizenship ceremony. When we're talking about their actual rights that they don't have until they've become Canadian citizens, we do have to remain nimble, whether that's a Zoom option or whether that is an online option. Again, we are still thinking about it, and the conclusion is not, the decision hasn't been taken.
Monsieur Miller, il semble y avoir un trou
Le canadien qui demande finalement bilinguiser, je dirais ainsi, la Constitution, rendre la version française. Est-ce que c'est dans l'objectif?
L'objectif du barreau concernant la Constitution et le fait que...
rendre la version francophone disponible, l'association du barreau vous demande cette semaine d'emboîter le pas, d'aller plus vite.
Mais je crois que... Oui, mais je crois que effectivement, si c'est une question qui est en litige, je ne peux pas répondre parce que c'est possible que mes commentaires vont influencer la décision d'un juge, donc c'est pas propre pour moi.
Mais le barreau vous demande de mettre de la pression pour avancer quand même.
Mais c'est une question, c'est le principe de sub judice, c'est-à-dire que je ne peux pas influencer une décision qui s'en vient par un juge.
Donc tant qu'il n'y a rien dans les tribunaux, il ira
From Canada, so they have a report out saying that people who kill Indigenous women are far less likely to be charged with. Oh, you okay? Yeah. With charged with first-degree murder than people who kill non-Indigenous women, and when people who kill Indigenous women are sentenced, they receive far shorter sentences than people who kill non-Indigenous women on average. What are you doing to try to correct this imbalance?
Well, I think those statistics, I've not seen those statistics, but I will take it at face value what you just explained to me. Those statistics are very troubling. And what I would say is that it's incumbent upon all of us, myself included as the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, to ensure that we're doing everything we can to ensure fairness in terms of the application of laws with respect to Indigenous persons, whether they present as accused or as victims, but also ensuring that there's fairness and a more sensitive approach on the part of law enforcement and all actors in the judicial system and the justice system. What I mean by that is that we've got to work hard on curing things that relate to anti-Indigenous discrimination or racism. We need to work hard on curing overrepresentation of Indigenous persons in the justice system. That's what we've been working on as a government. The efforts we made on Bill C-5 in addressing mandatory minimum penalties address the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in our justice system. So I'll continue to work on in terms of all of the responses to things like the TRC, the MMIWG. Today is the special and important day about recognizing what happened at MMIWG, and also on the implementation of the measures that relate to the UN Declaration.
So we wrote a story today about extensive links between IT contractors and government officials. A lot of questions about that. Do you have any concerns or lobbying rules being skirted, do you think?
We're certainly taking a very close examination of outsourcing contracts. I'm going to have more to say on outsourcing guidelines tomorrow.
Oh.
I would like to also address questions relating to the spending review, generally speaking. This is a time when Canadians across the country are examining their pocketbooks to examine affordability issues within their own homes. And the Government of Canada is no different. We are making sure that our fiscal house is in order. And the spending review is asking each minister to look at any excess spending, for example, on outsourcing, for example, on executive travel, to determine whether there is any waste and the ability to refocus spending on priority issues for Canadians. So this spending review is really just looking for mere cents on the dollar in terms of refocusing that spending towards the government's priorities. So government spending, generally speaking, is still increasing. This is not 2.0. This is actually being prudent fiscal managers of the public purse.
Can you comment on the fact that outsourcing at the CBSA involving the same companies that worked on Wab Kinew is now the subject of an RCMP investigation?
I'm not going to comment specifically on that point, but as I said, outsourcing contracts has been under very close examination by the previous minister and me. And as I said, tomorrow I will be making comments on our outsourcing guidelines that we are coming forward with.
Do you think lobbying rules are being skirted here? Because these IT contractors are setting up meetings between another company and the government officials, and none of this is ever disclosed in the lobbying registry.
Of course, we need to make sure at all times that the law is being followed, and I always hold that as my ultimate priority. Again, I'm not going to comment on that specific point, but I'll speak with you about the outsourcing contracts tomorrow when I speak more specifically about our guidelines.
On India, can you talk to what you see and are hearing from constituents about the impact and their concerns around what's happening diplomatically and the, I guess, apparent expulsion of Canadian diplomats?
Sure. Across the South Asian community, including people like myself who have relatives in India, there is broad-based concern. I will say that we are working very hard to make sure that we're upholding the rule of law and also maintaining the people-to-people ties between our countries.
How are they going to be maintained? How are they going to be maintained if they can't travel?
Sur l'Inde actuellement, est-ce que c'est pas difficile de maintenir cette position-là sur l'Inde, de rester ferme tout en essayant de négocier?
On doit se souvenir qu'il y a deux choses ici. Il y a les relations entre deux pays, l'Inde et le Canada, et l'autre côté aussi les relations entre les familles, entre les amis. Ce sont des relations très proches et nous devons continuer d'être avec nos familles, avec nos membres de nos familles. Et ça, c'est une priorité pour tout le monde, surtout pour...
Merci.